You don't deserve a dime of this, Dad. You're too old and too stubborn to handle money. Those words came from my own son, Eric, across the polished oak table inside Johnson County Courthouse in Iowa City. His voice dripped with arrogance, echoing through the room as if he wanted every bystander to hear his insult. Beside him, his wife Rachel smirked, adjusting her pearl necklace like she'd already won. I sat there, staring at the grain of the wood, my hands clenched together so tight the veins stood out like blue ropes. That wasn't just a son lashing out in anger. It was a calculated strike. My boy, the same boy I raised on peanut butter sandwiches and long nights fixing cars in our driveway, was trying to strip me of the very thing I built with my own two hands. My home, my savings, and the dignity that came with both. Before I continue, if you're new here, please like, comment, and subscribe, and tell us where you're watching from. Now, let me take you back. My name's Daniel Wright. I'm 68 years old, retired after 40 years working as a mechanic at a little shop off Highway 1, right outside of town. I'm not fancy, never was. My hands stayed black with grease more often than clean. But that shop, and the side jobs I took, put food on the table, kept the lights on, and eventually helped me buy a modest two-story house in Iowa City. It wasn't much by the world's standards, but it was mine. Every shingle on that roof, every coat of paint, every creak in the stairs. I paid for it. My wife, Margaret, may she rest in peace, filled it with warmth. She planted roses by the porch, baked pies on Sundays, and made it a home worth fighting for. When she passed 5 years ago, everything dimmed. The house was too quiet, the dinners too lonely. My kids, Eric and my daughter Anna, came around less and less. At first I thought it was grief, or busy lives, but soon I realized it was something colder. Distance. Still, I helped when I could. I loaned Eric money when his construction business stumbled. I covered Anna's student loan payments when she couldn't. I never kept tabs. A father doesn't keep receipts for love. But lately, they'd started circling like vultures, asking about the deed to the house, about the savings I had in the local credit union. Eric even brought up transferring ownership early, so things would be easier down the road. I brushed it off, thinking maybe it was just careless talk. Until that day in court, Eric and Anna, sitting side by side, their lawyers whispering in their ears, acting like I was incompetent, like I couldn't handle my own affairs. They petitioned the court to declare me unfit to manage my estate. My estate. I had no sprawling fortune, no empire, just a house, a pension, and the little dignity I had left. Eric leaned forward, his voice smooth, rehearsed. Your Honor, my father is, well, he's not the man he used to be. He forgets things. He makes reckless decisions. We're only trying to protect what little he has left. I felt my jaw tighten. Forgetful? Reckless? I may be old, but I wasn't senile. I knew exactly what they were doing. They weren't protecting me. They were plotting to take everything while I was still breathing. I looked at Anna, hoping for some flicker of hesitation. She kept her eyes down, but the silence said enough. She'd chosen her side, and that's when it hit me. This wasn't just about money. This was about power, control, and greed. They didn't want to wait for me to die. They wanted me out of the picture now. The gavel hit the block, jolting me back to the moment. The judge's eyes scanned the paperwork. My children's smug expressions told me they thought they had already won. But what they didn't know, what no one in that courtroom yet knew, was that I still had cards to play. And when the time was right, I would turn their betrayal back on them so hard they'd choke on it. The courthouse air felt heavy, like a storm building. My hands trembled, not from weakness, but from rage held in check. I wasn't done, not by a long shot, because if my children thought they could bury me alive, they were about to learn I knew how to dig myself out and bury them instead. You always were dramatic, Dad. Eric's laugh cut through the kitchen like a snapped wire. He said it casual, like he was tossing away a tin can. Anna sat beside him on the breakfast bar, scrolling her phone, thumbs flying. Their kids, my grandkids, were at the table, oblivious, coloring between the lines. The house that once smelled of Margaret's cinnamon rolls now smelled faintly of takeout and the cheap cologne Eric wore when he wanted to impress a client. I kept my hands flat on the formica, feeling the edges of the laminate like a compass. "Dramatic?" I said, and the word tasted like gravel. "You came here asking for the deed last week, Eric. You wanted me to sign it over for ease of paperwork. That's not drama. That's practicality," Anna interrupted. Her voice had gone cold in a way I recognized from old arguments, an ice that ran in the family like a family heirloom. "Dad, we just want to make sure things are handled before anything unexpected happens. You wouldn't want the bank to freeze things or the house to go into probate for years." Practicality. Probate. The words were like instruments on a butcher's table. They sounded reasonable until you remembered who wrote the checks for the groceries and whose hands had installed the cabinets. "I've got my will," I said. "Margaret and I left things clear. The deed's in my name. You're not well," Eric finished for me. "You forget things. You missed your appointment last month. You left the stove on when you were baking. It's not safe." He looked at me with that practiced concern lawyers teach children to display when they want custody of a bank account. Anna nodded, eyes wet but controlled, like someone had taught her how to cry on cue. It was small-town theater. I'd seen versions of it at the diner, in the checkout line at Miller's Market, in whispers behind the counter at Henderson and Myers Law. People in town took sides quickly, half siding with the son doing the responsible thing, the other half remembering me fixing cars, coaching Little League, giving away pies at church bake sales. But whispers have teeth. They dig. The next week, the whispers grew loud. Eric had spoken to a lawyer, one from a firm downtown who'd become the sort of person you saw in adverts for estate planning on late-night TV. They filed a petition, claiming concern for my cognitive decline. They suggested a conservatorship. They said it was temporary, for my protection. Temporary. I read the papers 3 times. Each signature felt like a tally mark in a ledger. Eric handed me a paper to sign. Power of attorney. A form that would let him handle my bank accounts while I got better. I refused. He smiled the way people do when they know they've set a trap and they're waiting for the mouse to run. "You're being stubborn, Dad," he told me once, after I'd told him I wouldn't sign. "Stubborn like Grandpa. That's admirable until it leaves you broke." That night, I walked the house. Margaret's roses were overgrown, petals gone to bruised red on the path. I went through drawers, old toolboxes, envelopes filled with Margaret's recipes, the little yellowed receipts I'd kept because they were trivia I liked having. I found a bank statement folded into a drawer like a secret bird. The savings were small, modest enough to be ordinary, but not nothing. I'd tucked away enough to keep the lights on and maybe pay for a trip back to see my sister in Ohio. I called my old friend, Jim Walters, who ran the credit union on Main Street. Jim's been there longer than the building's neon sign. He listened, then told me things that made my stomach slump. "They can't just declare you unfit without medical proof," Jim said. "They'd need a physician's letter, a court hearing. People don't get stripped of their power overnight. But once those papers start, son, momentum takes over. It's a machine." That word, machine, stayed with me. Machines could be fixed. They could also be jammed. I started watching them. Eric's calls, scheduled like appointments. Anna's texts that came at odd hours. I began to pay attention to details I hadn't wanted to notice before. Eric's car in the driveway longer than it should be. His footsteps on my porch late at night. The way Anna's eyes darted to the back room where I kept the deed. I walked down to the courthouse twice, slow and careful, leaning on a cane. The staff recognized me. I'd seen them at the Christmas parades, At city council hearings. In the clerk's office, I found paperwork, copies of petitions, preliminary motions filed by Eric's attorney. The petition asked for a competency hearing in 21 days. 21 days is a long time when your life is being measured out in court dates. It's also a short time to find the truth. So I started to gather mine. I dug into the lawyer Eric had hired, the one with the glossy brochures. He'd done estate work for a few families in town, people with river houses and second cars. I called a retired county judge I'd once helped move a rusted lawnmower to the curb, and he agreed to talk. I visited the title company on Elm Street and asked about the deed process, not because I could afford a new lawyer, but because knowledge is a currency no one can seize. And then I found something that made my chest clench. A note slipped between pages of Margaret's recipe book, in her handwriting. Just 3 words. Check safe deposit. My hands shook when I read it. Margaret had always been the one to tuck little reminders where only she would think to look. A safe deposit box? It was the kind of thing you hear about in novels, not in lives with milk stains and master mechanic's oil. I had to know. I walked into Miller's bank first thing the next morning. The teller at the counter remembered Margaret, how she used to bring her sewing to the bank open house. The manager, a woman named Claire, led me to a small back room and asked for ID. My heart was a drum. "We need a copy of the lease or a signature card," she said. "Browse knitting." "There's a box in Margaret's name," I said. She left a note. "I need to see what's inside." Claire hesitated, then went to check. When she came back, her face had that strange blend of professional neutrality and human pity. "Mr. Wright, there's a paperwork trail you'll want to see. Someone's asked about the box in the past month." My mouth went dry. Someone had been poking where they shouldn't. Someone had been looking for things Margaret and I had kept private. "Did they get in?" I asked. My voice sounded older in the quiet room. Claire folded her hands like she was keeping a secret behind them. "We're required to inform the renter, but we can't disclose anything until the legal process is complete," she said. "But there are documents filed in your name. We can provide copies if you file for them at the court." Court. Again. The machine grinding. I left the bank with a photocopy of a letter, someone from Eric's attorney, asking about the box. It was the first hard paper that tied my kids to the prying. When I got home, Eric was in the living room, pretending to read the paper, but I could see the way his hands trembled when he thought no one watched. He smiled when I stepped in, small and empty. "You shouldn't have gone poking around, Dad," he said. "Let the lawyers do their job." I folded the photocopy onto the coffee table and looked at him, at Anna, who lingered at the doorway. "You started this," I said. "You chose this path." Eric's grin slipped. For a moment, I saw the boy who'd learned to ride without training wheels, who'd scraped his knee and come home to a bandage and a joke. The man in front of me had traded that for a briefcase and a plan. "This ends in 21 days, he said. "Let the court decide." The clock in the hallway ticked loud as a judge's gavel. I felt something settle in my chest, a cold, clear decision. I would not let them bulldoze me out of my life. If they wanted a war over glass and paper, fine. I would fight with the things they couldn't buy. Memory, witnesses, and the stubborn truth. And then I found the envelope. It was slipped in the back of Margaret's recipe book, taped shut, with my name on it in her looping hand. Inside was a single key and a folded paper. My name, my sister's phone number, and one sentence. "If they come, use the key. Don't let them take more than they already have." My hands went numb. The key was cold, but it felt like a promise. Outside, the sky boiled with late afternoon clouds. Inside, under the familiar hum of the refrigerator, I realized the fight was no longer about a deed or a bank box. It was about who we were when no one was watching, and how far my own children would go to rewrite the story of my life. I didn't sleep that night. The key Margaret left sat on my nightstand. glinting in the lamplight like it was daring me to figure out its purpose. I turned it over and over in my hand, trying to guess what lock it belonged to. A bank box? A storage unit? Or maybe something I'd forgotten entirely. Something Margaret had handled on her own. The house was quiet except for the old clock in the hall, ticking each second closer to that 21-day deadline. My children thought they'd cornered me. They thought an old man with stiff knees and shaky hands couldn't fight back. But Margaret's note, that was my reminder I wasn't alone. Even from the grave, she was helping me. The next morning, I drove my old Chevy down to Miller's storage on the edge of town. The owner, Frank, had known Margaret well. She used to rent space there back when she ran church drives. My stomach twisted as I held up the key. "Frank, you recognize this?" I asked. He squinted, then nodded slowly. "Yeah, looks like one of mine. Unit 27, maybe 29. Why you asking?" My pulse kicked. Margaret had rented a storage unit. I asked him to check, and sure enough, her name was still on file. Margaret Wright, leased almost a decade ago, payments kept up automatically through our joint account. I never even knew. Frank walked me back to a row of corrugated metal doors, wind whistling through the gravel lot. Unit 27. The key slid in and turned smooth, like it had been waiting all these years. Inside was dust and darkness, and then, when the light flicked on, I saw what Margaret had hidden. Boxes. Dozens of them, labeled in her neat handwriting, taxes, 1900, C95, 2010. Mortgage papers, family letters, and one box at the very back, different from the rest. Not labeled, taped shut. I dragged it forward, my hands shaking worse than usual. Inside, under yellowed tissue paper, lay a leather-bound binder. And inside that binder, copies of deeds, bank records, and receipts, not just mine. Eric's credit card statements with his name, bank withdrawals, loan agreements, and Margaret had written little notes in the margins. Paid with Dad's loan. Covered again by Dan. Don't forget this. My chest burned as I flipped page after page. She'd been keeping track. Every dollar I'd lent Eric when his construction business nearly went under. Every check I'd written to cover his mortgage payments when he was between jobs. Every bailout. Every safety net. The total Margaret had tallied in the back came close to $200,000. $200,000. Money I never once called a debt. Money I considered part of being a father. But Margaret had seen further down the road. She must have known, somehow, that one day our son would twist generosity into weakness, and she had left me the ammunition to prove otherwise. I sat down on an old lawn chair in that storage unit, the binder heavy in my lap. My kids wanted to paint me as reckless, incompetent. But this binder showed who the reckless one really was. Eric had bled me dry for years, and now he wanted to declare me unfit so he could take what little was left. I closed the binder and locked the unit back up. Driving home, I could almost hear Margaret's voice in my head. Don't let them take more than they already have. That night, I called my sister, Carol, in Ohio. She's tough as nails, a retired school principal with a spine that could straighten steel. When I told her what Eric and Anna were doing, she went quiet. "Danny," she finally said, "don't you sign a thing. You hear me? Not a thing. You've still got rights, and they've got skeletons. I'll come to Iowa if I have to." Her words steadied me. For the first time in weeks, I felt like maybe I wasn't crazy. Maybe the machine wasn't unstoppable. The next few days, I started making quiet moves. I photocopied Margaret's binder. Every page. I asked Jim at the credit union to notarize the copies. I slipped one set into the safe deposit box at the bank, this time under my name. Another set I mailed to Carol, and I kept the originals hidden in the storage unit, taped back inside that box. If Eric thought he was clever, I'd be one step ahead. The tension in the house grew thicker. Eric stopped pretending to visit for family's sake. He came by to check in almost daily, pacing the living room, asking questions about my mail, my bills, whether I'd considered making things easier for everyone. Anna grew colder, her texts shorter. My grandkids still hugged me, still asked for cookies, but even they seemed uneasy, sensing the undercurrent. One evening, Eric cornered me in the kitchen. "Dad, this is getting ugly. We don't want to go to court, but if you keep resisting, then what?" I snapped. "You'll drag my name through the mud? You'll make the whole town believe I'm senile? You'll pretend I can't handle my own life?" His jaw tightened. If that's what it takes. He didn't realize I'd already prepared the battlefield. Because in 19 days, when we stood before that judge again, I wouldn't just defend myself. I'd show the truth, the greed, the debts, the lies. The courthouse lights would shine on him instead of me. And my son. My son would finally see that the old man he thought was broken still knew how to fight. The morning of the hearing, I dressed slow and deliberate. Black slacks, a pressed shirt Margaret had once ironed for church, and the old leather shoes I kept polished out of habit. My reflection in the bathroom mirror looked tired, sure, but not weak. I wasn't walking into that courthouse to surrender. I was walking in to fight. The courthouse in Iowa City bustled like it always did on hearing days. Lawyers with briefcases, young clerks balancing stacks of files, locals showing up for traffic tickets. But my case, my family's war, would be heard in the probate division, where lives were measured in deeds, signatures, and credibility. Eric and Anna were already there when I walked in. He wore a gray suit, slick hair, that smug grin he thought made him look confident. She looked smaller, her eyes darting toward the judge's bench, but she stayed close to her brother. Their lawyer, a tall man with a voice like sandpaper, shuffled papers at their table. I sat at my own, alone, but not empty-handed. My briefcase held Margaret's binder, the photocopies, and one final envelope Jim from the credit union had given me, notarized and sealed. The bailiff called the case. In the matter of Wright conservatorship, petitioners Eric Wright and Anna Matthews against respondent Daniel Wright. The judge, a sharp-eyed woman named Judge Harlan, peered over her glasses. "Proceed," Eric's lawyer started smooth. "Your Honor, my clients bring this petition not out of greed, but out of love and responsibility. Their father has demonstrated patterns of forgetfulness, recklessness with finances, and a refusal to plan for the inevitable. They only seek temporary conservatorship to ensure his safety and the security of his modest estate." He used the word modest like it was dirt under his nails. Eric leaned forward, rehearsed. "Dad forgets to pay bills. He leaves the stove on. He gives away money without tracking it. We just want to help before something catastrophic happens." I clenched my jaw, but stayed silent until the judge turned to me. "Mr. Wright, how do you respond?" I stood, my palms sweating against the wood. "Your Honor, I may be 68, but I'm not incompetent. I've paid every bill on time, I've kept my house in order, and I've managed my finances without anyone's help. What my children fail to mention is that I've been the one covering their bills for years." Eric's face twitched. Anna shifted uncomfortably. I opened the binder. "This is a record my late wife, Margaret, kept. Every loan, every bailout, every mortgage payment I covered for my son, Eric. Nearly $200,000 over 20 years. Not debts because I never asked to be repaid, but certainly not evidence of a reckless man. Evidence of a father who gave until it nearly broke him." Gasps rustled through the courtroom. I laid the photocopies on the judge's bench. Margaret's handwriting, meticulous and undeniable. Eric shot to his feet. That doesn't prove anything. He's twisting this. Sit down, Mr. Wright," Judge Harlan cut him off, sharp as steel. She flipped through the pages, her brow furrowing. "These are detailed, consistent records. Mrs. Wright's notations corroborate financial transfers I can confirm through the bank's statements attached. This does not demonstrate incompetence, it demonstrates generosity. Anna's lawyer tried to recover. Even if true, Your Honor, the issue remains whether Mr. Wright can competently manage his affairs going forward. Funny you should mention that, I interrupted, my voice steadier than I felt. Because I also have a notarized statement from my credit union manager. It confirms I've maintained accounts without delinquency, that I've kept savings intact, and that all bills are current. I handed it up. The judge read it silently, then set it down with finality. Eric's confidence cracked. His voice rose too loud. He's manipulating everyone. He's always been dramatic. The judge's gavel slammed. That's enough. The room fell silent. Judge Harlan looked directly at me. Mr. Wright, do you understand what your children are asking this court to do? Yes, Your Honor, I said quietly. They're asking you to declare me unfit, to strip me of my dignity before I'm even in the ground, but I've spent my whole life fixing broken things. Cars, homes, people. I may be old, but I'm not broken. The judge leaned back, her eyes narrowing at Eric and Anna. This petition appears less about protection and more about control. The court will not be weaponized for greed. Eric's face drained of color. Anna covered her mouth, tears slipping free at last. The gavel struck once more. The petition is dismissed. Costs will be borne by the petitioners. Gasps. Murmurs. The courtroom had turned into a stage for my children's humiliation. Eric slammed his papers into his briefcase and stormed out. Anna followed, silent, her heels clicking on the tile like gunshots. Their lawyer muttered something under his breath, retreating with them. I stood there, the weight of Margaret's binder in my arms, feeling a quiet wave of victory roll through me. The machine had been stopped, not by force, but by truth. And yet, as I walked out into the autumn air, I knew this wasn't finished. Because in their eyes, I hadn't just won. I'd embarrassed them. And people like Eric don't take humiliation lying down. The fight was over for today. But something told me the war wasn't. The courthouse doors swung shut behind me, and for the first time in months, I breathed like a free man. The October air was cool, crisp, the kind that carries the smell of fallen leaves and distant wood smoke. I clutched Margaret's binder tight to my chest, as though it were a shield forged from her love. But freedom has its price. In small towns, news travels faster than a brush fire in August. By the time I made it home, my phone was buzzing with calls and texts. Old friends, neighbors, even the pastor from St. John's, all wanting to know if it was true. If my own children had dragged me to court, trying to strip me of my rights. It was true, and now everyone knew it. At Miller's Diner that week, heads turned when I walked in. Some eyes softened with pity, others sharpened with judgment. A few old mechanics from the shop clapped me on the back, muttering, "Good on you, Dan, you showed 'em." But I also overheard whispers, people questioning what kind of children would do such a thing, and what kind of father raised them. That stung. Eric didn't take long to show his face. He came pounding on my porch one night, eyes wild, suit jacket half unbuttoned like he'd been drinking. "You humiliated me," he spat, his finger jabbing toward my chest. "Do you have any idea what you've done? Everyone's talking. Clients are canceling jobs. My reputation? Your reputation," I barked, the words sharper than I intended. "You tried to bury your own father alive, Eric, and you're worried about reputation?" He glared, lips curling. "You think you've won? You're old, Dad. Time's on my side, not yours. You can't keep this up forever." For a moment, the boy I'd raised flickered in his eyes. The boy who once begged me to build him a treehouse, who cried when he lost his first dog. But greed had hollowed that boy out, leaving nothing but ambition and pride. "I don't need forever," I said calmly. "I just need enough time to make sure you can't take what's mine." He stormed off, his footsteps pounding down the sidewalk like war drums. A week later, his business officially collapsed. Word spread that creditors had pulled out after hearing about the court case. Clients didn't want to trust a man who'd betray his own father. Trucks were repossessed, half-built homes abandoned. By Thanksgiving, Eric was living in a rented duplex on the edge of town. Anna fared no better. Her husband left, tired of the drama and the debt. I heard through the grapevine she'd moved back in with a friend, her eyes always red from crying. She never came to apologize, never called. Maybe shame kept her away. Maybe pride. As for me, I kept the house. I trimmed Margaret's roses, fixed the creak in the stairs, and set her picture on the mantel where the morning sun touched it first. I wasn't rich, not in the way banks measure, but I had peace. Sometimes I sit on the porch at dusk, the cicadas buzzing, and I think about justice. It doesn't always come in handcuffs or headlines. Sometimes it comes quiet, like a tide that pulls the greedy out to sea and leaves the honest standing on shore. Eric and Anna thought they could steal my dignity, but in the end, it was theirs that dissolved. The courthouse didn't just save my name, it exposed theirs. And Margaret, she was right all along. She knew our children's weaknesses, knew one day they'd test me. She left me the binder, the key, the trail of truth. She left me the tools to fight one last battle. Now I keep her roses blooming. Year after year, a reminder that even in betrayal, something beautiful can survive. So if you're watching this, remember, family can cut deeper than any stranger. But truth lasts longer than greed ever can. Tell us your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories.